Okay, welcome everyone to this meeting of the Digital Governance and Safety Committee. Rowan has unfortunately had to send her apologies, so she isn't able to chair this meeting. So that task has fallen to me this afternoon as vice chair. In the interest of time, as is usual, I will ask people attending as committee members or representing others at the meeting to introduce themselves formally when they either present or ask a question, if that's okay. We've had 4 apologies for today's meeting. Obviously, Rowan, I've already mentioned. Rydian Hill is also not available, and Dr. Matthew Wintle, Associate Medical Director for Secondary Care, is attending on his behalf. Thank you, Matthew. Paul Evans, Head of Quality and Regulatory, is also unavailable, and Laura Beddoe, Quality Manager, is stepping in for Paul. And Julie Ash has also sent her apologies. Don't think there are any others, Chris, unless you're going to alert me to anything. No, okay. There will be a private session of this meeting following this public session where we'll discuss matters that are more sensitive. We will, however, record the key decisions from that meeting and make those available at our next public meeting via a set of abridged minutes. The committee papers for this meeting are on our website, and a recording of this meeting will also be published on our website for anybody, members of the public or staff, that would like to see the proceedings later on. This meeting is scheduled to last until around 2:30. I'll try and keep us to time. The plan is to have a 15-minute break, comfort break after that, before we resume with the private session at 2:45. I'll now move on to declarations of interest. I've not been made aware of any in advance of the meeting, so can I ask anyone attending if there's anything that they need to bring to my attention pertinent to today's proceedings? Okay, I can see no hands, so I assume that there aren't any. Are there any matters arising that anybody from the minutes that anybody wants to bring my attention to? Okay, so we have 2 sets of minutes, private, abridged, and the public meeting. So can I ask again, are there any amendments, or are we okay to approve those minutes as a record of the previous sessions we had? Okay, I can see some thumbs up and nods of head, so we'll take the minutes of the last meeting as approved. I'll now move us on to item 2.2 on the agenda, which is the forward work plan. I'll ask Chris. Oh,
David,
sorry,
I think Rachel had her
Yeah.
had her hand up just on the last item, David.
Thank you for spotting that, Alistair. Rachel, sorry.
Apologies, Chair. I've got a bit of a delay with Teams. It's taken a while. There seems to be a delay, so I was trying to get my hand up before you moved on there. Sorry about that. It was
okay.
a very, very minor comment, and I can send it on to the corporate governance team, but it was just a minor correction on page 12 of the notes. It refers to Ascent Plus as one of the R&I projects. It should be Ascend. So a very, very minor correction, but I can send that on.
Okay, our governance team will pick that and make sure they're amended before they're formally approved. Thanks for spotting that, Rachel. Okay, so let's move on then to the forward work plan, item 2.2. Chris, could you talk us through that and maybe the other 4 items on the consent agenda, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Chris Darling, Board Secretary for DHCW. In terms of the forward work plan, I wasn't going to go into any detail, just to note a couple of changes. We have updated it to reflect the change in committee assignment with the new committee, Programme Governance Committee. So there's a few items that previously came to this committee that have been removed. We continue to ask colleagues to horizon scan, and we've populated the forward work plan based on feedback from members that attend this committee. So I'm grateful to those that have helped populate that. I'll just run through each of them, Chair, if that's okay, as you've asked. The DGNS committee annual report, this is included for endorsement. This is a summary of the activity of the committee over the past 12 months. If endorsed today, it will go to the SHA board for formal approval to adhere to our requirements under our standing orders, that each of our committees have an annual plan that reflects the work of the committee over the last 12 months. Item 2.4, our committee effectiveness survey. This is on for noting, and again, a requirement of each of the board subcommittees to formally assess their effectiveness over the course of the 12 months. Included is the feedback, anonymised in terms of how we've presented it today. Overall, a positive picture in terms of the openness and candour around the debate that we've had as a committee. No actions in terms of changes requiring improvement. So that's on for noting. And then the committee terms of reference, which again is an annual review, are on for approval. Just noting the change, which we talked about at the last committee meeting, removing the reference to oversight of national DHCW hosted programmes. That's moved into the new committee terms of reference, and that's been approved. So those terms of reference are updated to reflect that. And finally, the cycle of business, that's the next 12 months forward look. The forward work plan will then be a live document taken from that cycle of business and constantly iterated as items are identified and removed. That's item 2.5, and we're asking for approval of the annual cycle of business.
Okay, can I ask, has anybody got any reason not to approve? Okay. Thanks, Chris. You can take it as approved. Okay, I'll now move us on to items 3.1. That's the action log. There were two actions from the last public meeting, both of which are now closed, and the actions have been outlined in the appropriate response has been outlined in the log. Moving on to item 3.2, corporate risk register. Chris, could you take the lead on this item, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So just going to start by reminding committee members the approach we take. So we take a committee assignment approach. So each of our corporate risks are assigned to a subcommittee of the board to allow a bit more oversight and scrutiny. An exec lead is also assigned to each of our corporate risks. As mentioned earlier, there are a number of corporate risks that were assigned to this committee that have moved on to the programme's delivery committee. But the Digital Governance and Safety Committee continue to oversee the corporate risks relating to the areas set out in its terms of reference. So just with that introduction, to give a picture of the current risk profile, corporate risk profile for DHCW, there's 19 risks on the corporate risk register. 11 of those corporate risks are assigned to this committee. There are 7 in the marked as public for digital governance and safety, and 4 classified as private. So those are the risks that we'll focus on today. And before we get into that, just to go through some of the changes over the last few months since the last committee meeting. So just to note new risks, there have been 4 new risks entered onto the corporate risk register. They've all been assigned to either the Audit and Assurance Committee or the Programmes Delivery Committee. So no new risks assigned to the Digital Governance and Safety Committee. There's been 1 change of risk score assigned to a risk relating to the Audit and Assurance Committee. In terms of risks that have been removed since we last met, there are 2 that relate to the Digital Governance and Safety Committee. So 1 was around the new requirements impact on resources and the plan, and that was subject to a deep dive at the last committee meeting. It was one of our long-standing risks, and recognising the work that's gone on through our IMTP process that Michelle talked through at the last committee meeting. It was agreed that one would be downgraded but continue to be monitored at a directorate level. So that's reflected in the risks removed. The other risk is 0292, high concentration of unfunded posts in infrastructure teams. That's since the last meeting been downgraded to directorate level. So I'll invite Sam just to comment on this one.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So this was the risk that we have people who are permanently employed in roles for which funding has previously ceased. So effectively, there isn't any funding to sustain the role. But that said, we are offsetting those roles against our vacancy positions. So we do have a number of vacancies within the directorate. We've also done an exercise to formally net off unfunded roles as far as we can against vacancies. So we've actually been deleting some vacancies in order to reduce the number of unfunded roles and then repurposing that funding. We've got a robust process in place now within our directorate management team to manage recruitment, to make sure that we're making those assessments about vacancies versus funding when we bring people in. And we're also in the process of designing the second phase of our organisational change programme, which will really look at the whole establishment for operations and then make sure that we're directing the available resources and funding into the areas that we need capability and capacity.
Thank you, Sam. David, I'll just pause to see if there are any questions or comments to that before I carry on.
Okay, Alistair.
Thanks, David. Yeah, so it's just really a question regarding the flip side of what you've just described, that we don't recognise that there may be a risk that we are employing people on a permanent basis, when actually it would be more appropriate to employ them for a shorter period of time. And I just wonder whether or not that flip view is something you would regard as a risk, or something we need to be concerned about.
Yeah, I think it is a risk.
Might be on a role that might be on a short-term contract or agency for a period of time. Sorry, Sam.
Yeah, I think it is a risk, Alistair. And we've now put in place a position within operations that we don't recruit permanently into roles which have short-term funding. So we've effectively stopped that and prevented it going any further forward. There is one exception to that, which is the team that we're establishing for DSPP for the NHS Wales app, because we need to build an in-house capability for that. So, and the funding for that is currently time limited, but we're taking a conscious risk in that space. But across the broader picture in operations, we're no longer doing that, and we are making more use of short-term resources where it's appropriate.
Thanks, Alistair, you okay? No further. Yeah, okay. If I could just come in on that, Chris, before I allow you to press on. So I think that's a very pragmatic approach, Sam. It's difficult to recruit some people with the skills that we need. And if you advertise posts as fixed term, you may not get the right applicants. So I think it's a pragmatic approach. But Alistair, you make a good point. There is some risk associated with that. But as long as we've got some processes in place to manage that, I think it's a pragmatic way of trying to deal with some of the issues we've got. Chris, back to you.
Thank you, David. So just want to make the committee aware we have got two of our corporate risks down for deep dive discussions in private session, which Darren will take us through later on this afternoon. So 0263 and 0320. So that's the data functions and the citizen and stakeholder trust in uses of health and social care data. So I wasn't proposing we go through those in detail here, David, recognising that discussion is to come. Yeah. There are then a number of risks that are remaining on our risk register assigned to this committee. So just wanted to get updates on those. There's the 0300, the CANISC screening and palliative care risk, which committee members will be very aware of, and there will be an update at the programmes delivery committee on CANISC in terms of detail on that next week. There's 0296, the allergies and adverse reactions single source risk. 0308, sustainable funding for NIAS. I'll ask Darren to say that in full without the acronym when I bring him in now. And then 0316, the technical debt accumulation, which Sam might want to comment on. And then 0321, sustainable funding for WASPI. So in terms of the technical debt risk, Sam, do you want to comment on that first? Because I think the others are all for Darren to comment, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And I forgot to introduce myself last time. So Sam Lloyd, Director of Operations. The technical debt risk is really around, this is looking at the technical debt that's accumulated in our application space. So I want to be clear that DHCW over the last couple of years has put a lot of money and investment into reducing tech debt in infrastructure. So, data center moves, hardware refresh, etc. So there's a lot of investment that's gone into that, and that's significantly stabilized our underpinning infrastructure. But from an application perspective, we are in a situation where we've got quite a number of systems across our estate that have been in operation for some time. And as we look at moving into a more digital sort of native product operating model, there is a risk that those systems will start to constrain the pace at which we're moving forward. So that's really how we're defining technical debt, is constraints that prevent us moving forward at the pace that we would want to. So there are a number of activities which are now underway, which will over time start to reduce that. So one is we've undertaken a DevOps maturity assessment. So that's looking at the maturity of our software engineering capability across our teams. And there's a number of recommendations that have come out of that, which we'll be looking to implement over the next 6 to 12 months. We've done an exercise with Microsoft to look at the economic case for migration to cloud. That's produced some quite encouraging figures, and there is clearly an economic case that will support that transition. So we're now in the process of mobilizing that as a program of work and shaping that up in more detail. We're also about to kick off a piece of work which will look at the total cost of running some of our core systems. So essentially WCP, so the Welsh Clinical Portal, Welsh Patient Administration Service, and the Welsh Nursing Care Record, which are probably the best approximation to the sort of electronic health record services. So look at the total cost of running and continuing to develop those over the next 5 years, but then comparing those against market offerings which are playing into the similar space, and also looking at the functionality gap between what's available in the market versus what's what we're doing with our services on-prem or services that we've built, and that will help us to determine a strategy for moving those forward. There's also the ongoing work with the National Data Resource and starting to onboard data sets into that, and also our APIs and open architecture program, which is now starting to bear fruit. We've got an APIs roadmap which we've published. So there's a lot of activity in this space, and over the next 6 to 12 months, we will start to see some reduction in that technical debt landscape. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Chris?
Yeah, thanks, David. I'll invite Darren just to comment on the other risks assigned to the committee that are still on there, Darren, if that's okay.
Yep, thanks, Chris. Darren Lloyd, Associate Director for Information Governance and Patient Safety within DHCW. So I'll take the two risks around the sustainable funding, 0321 around WASB and 0308 around NIAS. The National Intelligent Integrated Auditing System, the risk was associated around sustainable funding. I'm pleased to say now that there's been part of the core monies and the settlement for the next financial year through Welsh Government has spotlighted the fact that we need a sustainable position for NIAS in terms of procuring and the ongoing commitment of having a audit system that covers across a lot of our large portfolio and our platforms. So I'm recommended that this risk actually can now be closed on the basis that we have a sustainable funding position for the product. That has been confirmed as well by our Executive Director for Finance. So I'm currently working with our finance team in order to understand the profiling of the finance against our current contract and then a future contract that we will have to go to market for in due course. But we needed a sustainable position to understand what our market approach would be. So that's really good news. That will be part of our core funding allocation in order to make sure that we got a sustainability for that particular service. Likewise with the Wales Accord for Sharing Personal Information, we've had confirmation that that will be part again of core funding. So I've had the indication that we can go with our approach to actually make WASB a code of conduct with the Information Commissioner's Office the first one in the UK potentially, in order to make that a code that will apply across all of those organisations that will be subject to the WASB Code of Conduct effectively, and the framework that we've already established. So I'm also recommending that risk can actually be closed off, because we have a sustainable position. I'm happy to take questions on those 2 items before I move on to the others, if there's any.
I can't see any hands, Darren, but I'll just say well done on 3 counts there in terms of getting WASB to where it's got to, and the 2 funding streams. That's really good news, and the fact we can take those risks off is excellent. I do have one question around the NIAS. What's the timeline for the existing system, and at what point will we need to look for a replacement?
We've come to the end of our commercial ceiling in terms of what we've done is extend our current contract to another. Well, it was a 3-year provision, but that's elapsing. So we're about 2.5 years into actually having to replace and go back out to market fully for a brand new offering and undertaking. So, but we have to go to market within the next financial year to start that dialogue and all of the process there. So we've got just just over 2.5 years in order to work through all of the procurement process before we go to either a new incumbent, or we have new suppliers that are potentially offering their goods and services.
Okay, thanks for the clarification, Darren.
Great. Chris, shall I pick up the 0296, which is the allergies and adverse reactions element? This risk is predicated on a number of other elements that are happening inside the organisation and some projects and programs. So from a patient safety perspective, we spotlight some of these things because there is a complexity of whether we have one source of the truth around certain bits of information that are available across not just our national systems, but locally as well, across local systems. So one of them is around allergies and adverse reactions. So part of the progress with this is that we're in part of the program work is to understand what we need from a central repository around clinical data effectively, which will be one single source of the truth that will allow us to store allergies and adverse reactions across that patient pathway, so that we have not got any delineated bits of information that actually do not describe consistently allergies and adverse reactions together with other clinical information. So this particular risk is incumbent on those programs of work in order to reduce that at the moment, and that work is going forward. I'm not at this time, I can't really say when we're likely to either reduce the risk or to close that risk out, depending on how that program works over the next 12 to 18 months.
Great. Thanks, Darren. Any questions before we move back to Chris? Okay, Chris, back to you.
Thanks, David. Yeah, so just to summarise really the position for the committee in terms of our risk profile. So there's the 2 risks that have been removed since the last meeting that were noted earlier. No new risks assigned to the committee. Just to note the updates from the leads there on the risks that are still on the register assigned to the committee, and just finally noting the 2 risks that will be removed following Darren's update now, which is really positive news because they have been on for a little while, so that's great. And just asking the committee to note those things, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Alistair.
Thanks, David. It's just a quick one, Chris, at the end of what's a very helpful explanation of what we're taking out, which I very much support where we're doing that. Do you think that we have got the balance right in our overall governance in terms of whether or not risk is more in the driving seat of strategy than opportunity? And is that balance something that we consider enough? How do we feel we've got it right? I'm not for a second there isn't any one of those risks that I'm not concurring with, but organizations can be almost led like moths to a flame by identification of risk that finds its way into this sort of mainstream of strategic thinking. And it's sometimes worthwhile just having a sense check. Have we got the balance right between opportunity and risk in terms of how it might influence strategy? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. I think the way we've approached risk, so we've got a risk and board assurance strategy that sets out our approach to risk, which includes seeing risk through the lens of opportunities and threats. So often the successful management of risk will lead to realizing opportunities, and I think we've tried to move more to considering risk from an opportunities perspective and from an environmental perspective. So on an annual basis, we obviously review our risk appetite and consider environmental factors affecting DHCW as an organisation and system-wide factors through things like the World Economic Forum, environmental trends around risks, and the UK government's national risk forecasts. They do tend to come at it from a risk threat perspective more so than an opportunities perspective. So I think it's always a good reminder to have opportunities at the forefront of our mind, particularly for DHCW, where things like the use of data, technology, AI, cyber are high risk areas, but also high in terms of opportunity. So as the board secretary, it's probably dangerous me making a judgment or comment on whether we've got the balance right. But I think some of our external audit findings would probably suggest we're along the right tracks in terms of our approach to risk at the moment. But always happy to take on board feedback in terms of how we can better potentially include opportunities through the lens of risk. And actually, we could perhaps have an offline discussion, because we have got a board development session in April with our slot to look at our annual approach to risk, risk appetite, etc. So we can consider it then.
Thank you, Chris. Alistair, any follow-up question?
Yeah, I think, Chris, you've just given an almost perfect example of that, and it's certainly not something we can address in a sort of facile way, that it's one or the other, and I wouldn't suggest that. But the perfect example, which we'll be spending a bit of time on in the private agenda, of how we engage with a broader base of users, from stakeholders to citizens, and still manage data. The natural reaction of a risk-averse organization, I'm not saying we are, but I'm asking the question: have we thought through who we are, where we should be in this? The natural reaction would very logically be that is too risky, it's too complicated, it has too many potential problems that can drive decision making around let's not move into that, where the opportunity may actually be on the right sort of direction on a continuum towards where the broader public sector, including health and including care, is moving, which is more towards citizen-based, user-based, a broader user base of the benefits of organizational investment, including our own, rather than what might be the narrower grouping, which might be an NHS-centric position on that continuum. So I think it's a great example, and perhaps we can pick some of this up this afternoon and beyond, as you say, in the development session. But thanks, David.
Okay, thanks, Alistair. Thanks, Chris. Alistair, I'd probably add to what Chris said. There's also another development session at the end of this month. That's probably a really good challenge to bring up when we're discussing the long-term strategy. So I welcome you bringing that up again, because I think it's a good challenge. Okay, we'll move on from corporate risk register update. Thank you, Chris. We've noted that and some really good improvement in terms of the overall risk position since last month, which is encouraging. We'll now move on to item 3.3 on the agenda, which is the Incident Review and Organisational Learning Report. And for that, we'll hand over to Keith Reeves.
Thanks very much, Chair. So by way of introduction, I'm Keith Reeves. I'm Service Management Team Manager, and I work very closely with Michelle to sort of chair and deputy chair the IRLG. So the purpose for this report, this is to cover the Q3 activities from IRLG, covering the 4 areas that we have within the scope of the group. So reporting, reviewing, learning, and improvement. Some elements of this will follow the standard approach that I used in previous months. Just giving some of the highlights. So for under the first section, which is about reporting, this is around the notifications to Welsh Government and to other statutory bodies for any incidents that we have. And it's really just to note that for a number of the, we've had a significant increase in the number of inquiries and the number of routes in to DHCW for feedback. These are primarily based on 2 areas. So one of them is there's more general inquiries about being received around the work that DHCW does and the promotion of DHCW generally. The second is more related to the promotion of the NHS Wales app. And the general public have increased the level of contact that comes into DHCW through the corporate governance areas on the website, through feedback through the app. With that, we've done some analysis, and because of that analysis, then we've identified some areas of improvement both for the app, but also for the support processes which we're putting in place. Sam mentioned earlier around the establishment of a support team for the sort of future communication of the app and future promotion of the app. So this has actually helped, getting this feedback has actually helped us to establish some more formal mechanisms on supporting this, and also to drive some of the cases for additional resource around this. The second section is about reviewing. So generally we are averaging, and I've said this before, we average around 2 to 3 reviews per month for the meetings, and that helps us to then define any improvements that we can identify through those reviews. So we try to break them down into different subject areas. Primarily, a lot of the reviews are around the technical incidents, but also we do have other reviews. So we have thematic reviews, we have commissioned audits, plus also some of the stuff that we've got going forward is going to be around other areas that we can learn lessons from. So things like lessons learned reports from programs. So we're slowly building up a better understanding and better level of learning across the organisation. For the reviews themselves, we've adapted a contributory factors framework. So this is to identify root causes and also what are the factors that actually cause those root causes. So breaking it down, we can then understand where we need to invest in additional improvement, whether it's additional training, or whether there's some technical elements that we need to look at. I think the highlights for the quarter, the main area that I've noted within the report is the increase on external contributory factors. So these are elements which are generally outside of the control of DHCW, but it's factors coming in from third-party suppliers, or from where we're hosting within a local health board, that means that we then have an outage of a system. And what we've identified from that is then where we can, again, put that improvement in place, learn from it. So we've got improvements now for around our supplier management processes, and actually working with the suppliers for them to better understand and share their learning, but also raising with the individual health boards where there's a local issue, how we can then share that learning with them, because it may be something that we've also experienced before or we've seen within other health boards, and it's bringing those lessons out and being able to share that. The final part for this is then around the actual improvements themselves, and just to note that we are rolling over some of the deliverables into 24-25, and from the service management side of things, we are looking at a more robust training or approach to training across the organisation within the service management processes. So we're looking at how we can better deliver major incident management training or change management training, and also looking at a wider competency program. So learning from industry, learning from some of the industry bodies about how they do competency, and trying to bring that in a way that would support DHCW missions, and being able to then provide that ongoing support for things like validation for medical device regulations, where they need to ensure that we have competent staff available. There are also 3 new improvements. So one of these is from the discussion at the last meeting or the previous meeting around the clinical strategies. So we're looking at sub-strategy improvements throughout all of that. So as soon as the strategies become embedded, then we will look at where we can identify any improvements arising from that. One of the new things that's coming in through NHS Wales and being driven by Public Health Wales is related to what they call the Enhanced Learning Programme. And this is really how NHS Wales can learn from any incidents that occur or anything that occurs across NHS Wales, not just technically, but also in clinical settings within IG, within cyber, so that we then can share that learning much wider than just within DHCW. So I know that the clinical team are working currently on that, and they're driving that forward. The last one is something that service management and clinical informatics are doing, and this is around actually having a better understanding, sharing that understanding of the impact that an outage of a system will have. So when we talk about an outage of, say, LIMS system, it's understanding what that impact is on pathology teams across NHS Wales, and that then gives the major incident management process, makes it look more robust, because we can then understand, okay, this is where the priorities are, this is where we need to look at. I think that's everything that I want to cover off in this. So let's see if there are any questions.
Thanks for the update, Keith. We have a question from Alistair.
Thanks, David, and thanks, Keith. Really helpful to look at it. I just wondered, this is not a qualitative report, it's more of a quantitative, but there is clearly a qualitative dimension to cybersecurity. So the breaches, the cybersecurity notifications, they potentially could have the impact on all the other areas that could drive notifications on all the other areas, which I think makes it somewhat unique. And I just wonder to what extent we're recognizing that in the way that we address cyber as a security issue. Thanks.
So if I start, and then possibly Calvin and Sam, if you want to respond as well. So within this report, it is around the primary impact area. So picking on cyber, yes, it would cover other areas. So cyber would also, and cyber incident would also cover on information governance. It would also cover on technical and potentially clinical. And it's the same with the technical one. So if it's a technical incident, it will cover 3, maybe 4 other areas. So whilst we don't reflect it in this report, the processes for review will mean that it wouldn't just be a technical review. We would bring in experience from within the cyber team to collaborate on that report, or we bring in on from IG, or we bring in from clinical. Does that help?
Yes, it does, and thanks, Keith. I don't suggest that we're doing this wrong. I'm just interested in whether it's something we could in any way look at. And I suppose really at the heart of my question is whether or not there are 1 or 2, and cyber possibly being one, perhaps technical more broadly being within that, that are potentially umbrella issues, and others which are operational issues. Not every cyber incident is an umbrella issue, but the potential for it is there. So I just wondered, have we thought about looking at it in a, it's not all in the same, sort of lineup?
Yeah, we do, and I think that's where the benefit of the contributory factors framework also comes in, because it then helps to widen that further. Because if an incident occurs, it could be training, or it could be resource, or it could be, so then you're bringing in other elements such as resourcing or organizational development. So we do, as part of that review, try to understand all sides of it.
Okay, thanks, Keith. Carmen, you got your hand up. Is it related to this, or do you have a question?
No, I got a question.
Okay.
So it was about the contributory factors framework, and the way that they're described at the moment. I would recommend that we change them a little. You know what I mean? As in, because like things in here are called active, and active I think means human error, as in, or those sort of things as a contributory factor. And then the technical ones, I think, are described in departmental, these kinds of, and I'm just wondering if there's a way that we can describe, even if we're using these as the kind of the definitive names for them, that we include like in brackets or whatever, what it means in language that we're more familiar with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. And you're right, the active ones are more around sort of human error, or in some instances it's where we've got plan changes that may not have been communicated out to health boards, so they raise an incident against it despite us knowing about it. So yeah, I'm happy to clarify that, and I think the part of the implementation of the framework was also to then review to make sure that it remains fit for purpose, and if that means moving things around, that's very all part of that review. So I'll probably pick up offline with you on that.
Okay, yeah, great, thanks.
Okay, good point, Carmen. Thank you. Marilyn.
Yeah, thank you for that, Keith. A great report. Just really want to follow on from what Carwyn said, that we've got people who are external to the organisation, and if they're actually going to sort of digest and understand what we're talking about, then we just need to have that clarification so they can see how we're progressing. Sorry, Marilyn, for an independent member. Sorry.
Thanks, Marilyn.
Yeah, so I'll take that on board, because we've got the end of year report for Q4. I'll incorporate that in there with a little bit more detail, and then for reports going forward, we'll have that broken down even more.
Thank you, Keith. Just one final point from me before we move on. So good to see that you're getting a lot more, or we're getting a lot more issues, not issues, but clarifications raised around the use of the NH Wales app. I think as that gets rolled out, we'll probably see more coming through. So it's good that you're sort of analysing what people are asking about and then putting in place some support for that. So because it will likely grow as the NHS Wales app gets further deployed.
Yeah, and I think part of it, and probably Chris, you'll also want to join in this one, is that the actual reporting mechanism is something that we need to look at for the NHS Wales app, and we are doing that before sort of public communications goes out, just to make sure that we have that right mechanism in place.
Yeah. Chris.
Yeah, thanks, David. It was just picking up on that point, actually, just recognising the NHS Wales app is in public beta testing. So we are getting, well, we've had a significant increase, actually, in the number of inquiries, concerns, etc., that have come through relating to the app. Not to be not unexpected, I guess, because that is the point of public beta testing. But encouraging in that should inform from a learning perspective how we launch and roll out the app when it does become a fully public facing application. And I think just to acknowledge that as an organization, the majority of the products and services that we deliver are more towards partners and users, service users, clinicians of our services. This is very different in that it's very much aimed at citizens. So it picks up actually one of the points Alistair was making earlier, and just really important that we take the learning from the feedback we get from the app through citizens, because it is a new area for us. Not to say we don't have some citizen facing products and services, but it is the minority, I think it's fair to say, at the moment.
Yes, good point of clarification, Chris. Thank you for that. Okay, so thank you, Keith, for the report. We're receiving that report for assurance purposes, which I think we've completed. I'll now move us on to other reports under the section 3.4 of the agenda, assurance reports. The first of those is the information governance assurance report, and for that I'll ask Darren to speak to this item.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just go through some of the salient points of the report again, as part of the kind of matter of course. Some of you may see that the format of the report has changed slightly. This is because we've recently had our strategy approved. So committee members may remember that back in November that the strategy was approved. So we are now framing the report clearly off the back of the strategy, so that we have some consistency and collaboration in terms of that strategy, so that people understand that we are using the strategy to its fullest extent in terms of assurance, and then our undertaking our responsibilities. So there are four elements. One is around meeting our statutory obligations. The other one is about our professional responsibilities and our role and responsibilities wider into NHS Wales. The other element is to contribute to the development and implementation of those aspects that contribute to the trust of the patients of the public and allowing them to exercise their rights. And the other element is building into our duty of quality and our quality agenda to make sure those functions are commensurate with that. So the report's framed around those four aims effectively. The other aspect, just to highlight then, is that we've, in terms of some of our corporate compliance, the information's there around what we're doing in terms of actions against our own compliance, against something like our aspect of the information governance toolkit. There's some work to do there, but we're following on from those, so we're making good progress. And then just spotlighting in terms of some of those requests for information and those type of things that we've had under aim 1. Aim 2 then around the aspects of what we're doing around what is our foundations, our data protection impact assessments. Again, that is moving forward and tends to be increasing a little bit as we take on more systems and services, and what we're doing in terms of expand them. Then the obligation is to make sure that we have a proper privacy and confidentiality assessment in the frame of a data protection impact assessment. So I'm just giving committee assurance that we're making sure that we're moving along with those, and we have a big suite of those data protection impact assessments which are readily available both to our service users and to the general public as well. in terms of aim 3, there's the other elements as well to note is that we've had a relationship with other statutory organisations where we've tried to collaborate on policies across Wales, information governance related policies. We've been doing some work in order to understand what the next steps are in order to either update those policies or combine them. So we've been doing some work so that we have a collaborative all Wales information governance policy that we're currently pushing through, and I'm hoping that over the next couple of weeks and months we will have another refreshed all Wales policy around information governance, which I feel is important because we're trying to create a framework through our strategy as well. So we need statutory organisations to understand that it's a collective responsibility in a lot of areas, certainly around information sharing, those type of things. We've got a deep dive in the private session. I won't go on to those. We'll tackle that in the private session. The other aspects around our duty equality, and one thing to spotlight is that our strategy now is being translated into our integrated medium-term plan, so that the components within the framework to include aspects of NIAS, Data Protection Officer Service, Wales Accord for Sharing Personal Information, and our IG Toolkit are settling now into our integrated medium-term plan and are resulting now as our next 12 months, 18 months and 3-year ambition about increasing the approach to those products, the users on those products, and to make sure that we're increasing the assurance around information governance in those areas. So that's to give the committee a bit of a flavour of those things that we're doing, and to give you assurance that we are moving forward, one on the strategy and then the component parts that are set within the strategy as well. And I'm happy to take any questions around that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Darren. I find it really helpful that you'd structured the report along the strategy line. It flowed quite nicely from that. I do have one question, but I'll just open the floor up to anybody else who might have a question on your report. I see no hands, so I'll ask my question then. Yeah, so could you just expand a little bit on aim 3, the collaboration you've been undertaking? Could you just expand a little bit on what organisations we've been working with in that regard? If you're able to. Sorry, if it's sensitive, then please tell me.
So in terms of the public trust element, of course, we're working alongside Welsh Government to understand those. Some of that is predicated on some of the key programmes that we've got, National Data Resource and those type of things. So we're working alongside the programmes. We're also working alongside other elements of programmes that are happening across Welsh Government. Rachel will come on to speak about some of the Find, Follow, Recruit and some of the research and innovation areas where there's public involvement in terms of intention, public involvement in terms of what we do with data and with information. So there are a number of different work streams ongoing in terms of where we are ensuring that there's transparency around the use of information and data, and to make sure that, of course, Digital Health and Care Wales has a proper established statutory responsibility for the collection, the processing, and the dissemination of routine and other information that we generate as part of our health and social care responsibilities.
Okay. Thanks, Darren. That's helpful. Let's pause if there's any other questions. I can't see any hands, so we'll move on to the next assurance report, which is the Informatics Assurance Report. And for this, I'll hand over to Laura.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Laura Bedell, Quality Manager, Regulatory Compliance. Kind of broke it down into 3 points. The key points coming out of Q3 are forward planning and our improvements. So the key points, Q3, we've had 21 papers that came through to the group, of which 6 of those in section 4, you'll see six of those had go live dates in Q3. 4 of those received the assurance approval from WIAG, 2 didn't. So the one anticoagulation form, that was delayed outside of the WIAG. They were updated by the project manager. They were integration elements, which is why it didn't go through the full approval yet. There was one, the Welsh Clinical Worklist Manager. So when writing the report, we identified that it had gone live with one user prior to receiving the full WIAG approval. So I've contacted the medical director, so I've escalated it to the medical director. We've reviewed the safety case and readiness report. Of the two missing approvals, one was medical devices. We were confident that it's not a medical device. They was purely not approved because of incomplete documentation. So going forwards, we'll ensure that the assurance lead writes that it's not a medical device, and given a caveat then that it's purely based on documentation. The second missing approval was around testing. So I've contacted the product and the project manager. It looks like the testing certificates were delayed. They think it may be due to Christmas period. Since writing the report, the testing certificate has been received by the assurance lead. So when I contacted the medical director, there was no request to escalate it any further. I think he took a proportional look at what the project was and decided that we would wait for the testing certificate to come through. Forward looking, January and February fully booked. So we have 15 papers coming through in January and February. There are actually 7 new projects coming through as well. So what we would call a show and tell. And March is already becoming quite booked up already. So it's looking like the Q4 is going to be an extremely busy period again. And improvements wise, we're looking at the still working on the Power App, the Power Platform. So we have we're working with the Centre of Excellence. We've shared it with the assurance leads, and we've shared it with a group of project managers. We've taken on board their feedback and we've made some changes. The thoughts around the Power App is purely to make the WIAG process much slicker, easier for both the assurance leads and for the project managers. So it will take away the need to come to the group at 3 occasions. So it'll take away the time burden of coming to the meeting. It'll also remove the various paperwork that they need to complete, and it will be done on one Power App, and it will be much more streamlined process. So the plan is Centre of Excellence are producing a video, so we're going to do the end-to-end process. Then the draft annual quality plan, we've got a go live date for Q1. So the aim is that we'll have the I think it's March, end of February, beginning of March. We've got the Centre of Excellence coming back to the group to we'll have shared the video to any final feedback. We're working with the medical director. He's aware of the changes. We will have a challenge. Q1 when it goes live, obviously we'll be running 2 systems, but we're aware of that, and the assurance leads and project managers all know that we're going to be for a short period. It will be 2 systems, but we're prepared for that, and we're getting ready to roll out some training and everything in the end of Q4, beginning of Q1 in preparation for the Power App. And that's my update, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Laura. Any questions for Laura on the report? Okay, I can't see any hands. Laura, can I just say we've had briefings previously on the app for automating the WIAG process, so it's really good to see that that's now progressed and we're at the point of going live. There will, based on the volume that you've got in front of you and the fact that you're running 2 systems, stretch the team a little bit during this period, but hopefully you can manage your way through that and land safely in the other side of the go live.
Yeah, well, thank you, Chair.
Okay, Sam, you have a qualification or question?
Thanks, Chair. It's just a comment really that we have now established a technical design authority for DHCW, which will oversee the development of principles, standards and blueprints that will be used for the design and build of new systems. And the idea is that through that process, and as that gains maturity, we'll be able to reduce the assurance overhead and the governance overhead in commissioning new systems, because by providing those templates up front for people to use, then they're effectively pre-assured. So people will only need to be able to demonstrate that they've used one of the approved templates. But obviously, it's going to take some time to bed that in. And what we're doing also through that process is understanding the relationship with WIAG and how some of perhaps the technical assurance responsibilities of WIAG will transfer over to TDA. But that's very much a work in progress.
Okay, no, thanks, Sam. That's really welcome. And I think that combined with the Power App once it's available will hopefully reduce the workload in this area of the business. So that's a really good update. Thank you, Laura. We note your report for assurance, and I'll now move us on to the next report, which is from Rachel for the Information Services Assurance Report.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Rachel Powell, Associate Director of Information Intelligence and Research, and I'm going to be taking the next two items, but I'll do the Information Services Report first and then pause for any questions. So the key updates from my perspective that are highlighted within the report, pinching Darren's thunder a little bit, because as Darren's already said, in November we brought the suite of clinical strategies to the committee to endorse prior to taking to board. From my perspective, the information and analytics strategy was approved, and one of the key activities that were being taken forward as a team since its publication has been, similar to Darren, looking at the implementation plan and how we can embed that and have some key milestones to drive forward for the integrated medium-term plan for 24-27. So that's something that we've completed in Q4 and that we're taken forward now. Linked to INTP performance then, we've continued to perform well throughout the year for all the information services milestones, and in Q4 we're on target to deliver the outstanding milestones for this financial year as well, so that's good. In terms of the Information Services Assurance Group, we've reviewed 10 assurance quality plans, 10 safety case and readiness reports, and 2 change requests in the period since November. And with regards to data centre migration, we've just achieved a successful failover of all information services from data centre 1 to data centre 2 and back again. And included within that is the switching service as well, which is really useful because this committee in particular will be familiar with the corporate risk associated with that. So for the first time, we've managed to achieve geographical resilience, and that helps to mitigate the corporate risk associated with the switching service. So really good in that respect. The Power BI assurance process, again, we've updated this group in terms of how that's proceeded, and it's been signed off and been implemented. The team's been producing a suite of materials and to support the implementation of that going forward, and to generate further information and knowledge across the organisation, and linked to that, as well as ensuring that all new corporate dashboards follow that due process prior to publication. We're also commencing a retrospective review of all dashboards that have been published to minimise that risk of any sensitive information being published and being inadvertently available where it's not supposed to be. So the team's taken that forward. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight some progress in respect of the primary care information portal that the primary care information team have been responsible for. So we've just published a new version, and we've had some really positive feedback from members and users of that really important portal, and particularly the users within health boards and primary care. And it just, one of the key features which is highlighted within the report, really does help to support the management of the GMS contract and requirements that are quite burdensome at times. So yeah, the portal really helps in that regard. And those were the key highlights from my perspective. No matters or escalations to the committee on this occasion, and I'm just asking the committee to note the progress and the assurances that we've put in place with regards to the management and reporting of data. And I'll pause for questions.
Great, thank you, Rachel. I'll just open it up for questions from colleagues if there are any. Okay, I can't see any, so I'll just comment on the really good news about the data center transfer and the switching service. That's encouraging. It feels like an old friend that we've revisited with that particular risk. The only one question I have related to that, have we made sufficient progress, Rachel, that we can now review that risk in terms of the score and maybe reduce it, or do we still need to do a little bit more work before we can reduce the risk score?
So you remember we broke it down following the external audit that we had on with regards to that particular area. We broke it down into 3 particular risks, and I think we are updating regularly, and I know other directorates are involved in the management of those risks as well now. So I think there's probably still some further work to do, but positively, what I would also like to comment is that we are undertaking work with regards to transitioning data from our existing data warehouse into the new I'm trying to remember the acronym for NDAP, the National Data Analytics Platform, which is part of the NDR Google Cloud platform. And so I think we're minimising the risk in terms of data being available within that platform as well. But that's the start of a long road and a long piece of work ahead. But constantly, but I think the data centre migration work certainly helps with regards to geographical resilience, and I know there was a particular risk associated with that. So I'm sure we can review the scoring of that.
Okay, that's really good. Thank you, Rachel. If there's no further questions on that report, I'll ask Rachel to move on to a R&I strategy assurance report.
Thank you. So with regards to the research and innovation report, then again, I feel like I've talked about this a lot recently. I know I was at board last week talking about giving a bit of an update with regards to progress and talking about the launch of our first annual report. But just to summarise some of the conversation that I had last week, it's been a year since we've had the research and innovation function in place on the back of the research and innovation strategy that was published towards the end of 2022. And again, like Darren was saying, we've broken down a lot of the milestones within our integrated medium-term plan to correspond with those particular strategic aims, and it helped to keep some shape and some direction in terms of guiding us through the phases and the next steps that we needed to take with regards to implementation of the strategy. There's 3 particular areas that I wanted to comment on with regards to the report, and that's around resource and governance and engagement. With regards to resource, and we've made some key appointments in the last year. So one of those was a head of research and innovation, and unfortunately, we're head of research and innovation is moving on to pastures new, but we've just appointed a really good replacement in a substantive post with Sadaf Shaheen. She started in January, so that's a really positive, strong appointment, and we're really fortunate that we've got a bit of an overlap period in which our current head of research and innovation is handing over at Sadaf, so we're not losing too much knowledge in that regard, and we're taking the work forward in the right way. We've also appointed a research and innovation support manager, which is really important. And again, that individual brings Jessica Bardsley, and she brings with her a lot of knowledge around the Welsh innovation landscape in particular. So when we talk about engagement and networking, which has been a really strong focus for the team over the last 12 months, Jessica helps to embed that approach even further, and it's got some really well established links. So we're utilising Jessica's knowledge in that regard. Again, with regards to resourcing, because I know it's been a particular interest to this group, is how we sustain this function going forward and how we continue to invest and build some capacity, certainly to support these activities on a longer term footing. And one of the key activities, as well as getting some key appointments in place, was ensuring that we've implemented and embedded a costing mechanism, so we can start to cost recover for some of the activity that we're leading and participating in. And historically, we've not been very savvy in that regard. So this is about ensuring that we've got dedicated support to take forward various R&I activities, but that we're costing on an appropriate basis, and we're aligned very much to what colleagues are taking forward across NHS Wales, and we're partners across the border as well. So that'll be useful to review, and we've had internal support for that costing mechanism, but we very much are in a review and see period to see how we can embed that and how we can take that forward. With regards to governance, we continue with the research and innovation, operational and engagement monthly meetings, where we progress and talk about, or we keep an eye on a lot of the key activities that the team's supporting. And I've listed some examples within the report with regards to Ascend Plus, Blood Cancer UK, the Rita chatbot evaluation, and also the work around academic programmes and achievements that we're supporting with various staff members. The Operation and Engagement Group then feeds into the Research and Innovation Board, which is chaired by our Executive Medical Director, Ridian Hurl, and we had the second meeting since the last DGNS committee. And one of the key, and I should say, Dr. Matthew Wintle is a key member of that group as well. Thank you, Matthew. And one of the key pieces of work that group's been overseeing at that senior level to provide the assurance that the work of the R&I function is progressing and that we've got those appropriate costing mechanisms in place, we're resourced appropriately, and to escalate any risks accordingly. One of the key pieces of work that that R&I board's been overseeing is the Find, Recruit and Follow-up proposal. Again, I alluded to this in the SHA board last week, but I know it's been noted on the forward work plan as well. It brings something back at I think at the committee meeting in May. So I'll provide a further update there. But just to say we're on target in terms of providing a fully fledged proposal, which will be issuing to Healthcare Research Wales in terms of what our proposition would be for delivering a Find, Recruit and Follow-up service to support the increase in clinical trials into Wales. So a really promising piece of work that I think will have enormous benefit for the residents of Wales, actually. With regards to stakeholder engagement, then very briefly, that continues to be, as I've mentioned, a really strong focus for the team, particularly as we're building our brand and we're building the function and starting to attract new pieces of work and activities. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight and get endorsement today from the committee was for the annual report, which has been included within the papers, and that gives a breakdown of some of the key activities that we've been involved with over the last year. So we've tried to collate all of that really rich work that's been going on in one place, because I know it's too much to cover in one update, but it's been a particular focus and of interest to understand the breadth of work that we support across research and innovation, and hopefully that report gives a bit of an idea of the type of things that we can get involved with and that we have been getting involved with. And I know we've been discussing with stakeholders as well who are keen to look at that, to understand what we could potentially do with them in the future as well. No matters to escalate other than to say, again, this has been our first year that we've been running the research and innovation function. So the team have really been doing a period of reflection over the last month when we reconvened after Christmas. We've been involved with the engagement team in particular, because as I say, engagement's been a really strong theme and priority throughout the work that we've been taking forward. So we've been doing a little bit of stakeholder mapping with regards to what our planned activities are going forward into the next year. And just reflecting on what's worked well, where we think we need to build our brand further, where we need to harness relationships and focus more attention on particular relationships. So we've been putting that plan together with the support of the engagement team within DHCW. And those were the key updates from me. So I'm just asking the committee to note the progress with regards to assurance and to endorse the annual report that's been enclosed with papers. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Alistair, you have a question?
Thanks, David, and very interesting indeed. Thank you, Rachel. Very informative. We've only had an R&I strategy, I think, for the last year, effectively. So this is a very formative period of time, and it's probably a good time to ask the question. But do you feel that we are a truly unique organization, or so is there any blueprint or comparator out there that can in some way give us a reference point, if not a guide, to how we approach something as big and important as R&I? And if there isn't, how do we go about determining what the scale and the depth of our approach to R&I strategy should be? Because it's capable of being absolutely enormous. I'm not suggesting that that's where we go with this, but in an environment where there are comparators, where we're not a unique organization, there can be real value and real comfort and assurance in looking how others go about it. But if we are very much unique, it puts a lot more on our shoulders in terms of also the governance and decision making around what this looks like. So interested in your thoughts on that, Rachel.
Thank you, Alistair. So I would agree. I think so my answer would be yes. I think we are very unique, certainly within the Welsh ecosystem, we're the lead in data and digital organisation, and with that brings enormous challenges, but it also brings enormous opportunities in respect of what we can do at scale and nationally on behalf of the ecosystem and the life sciences sector with respect to the provision of data with the right controls and regulations in place, of course. So I think we are very uniquely placed within Wales. That being said, we've got very good links with colleagues across the border. And if I can pick up an example, the find, recruit and follow-up work that we've been taken forward in particular, we've worked very, very closely, and we've been fortunate actually to have a really good relationship with NHS DigiTrials to understand the model that they've taken forward there. So where we are setting up something new, we're very, aware of, looking at what's available across the borders from where we're Scottish and English counterparts to learn from them and to draw upon their experiences and help inform our learning as far as possible. The other thing that I would add is that a lot of the engagement work that we've been doing over the last 12 months, and particularly with the life sciences sector in particular, has been about building the research and innovation brand and reintroducing ourselves as a research and innovation partner. But a key component of that has been discussing what Digital Health and Care Wales does and what we could offer. And it's been responding to the needs of the system as opposed to telling them what we think they want us to do. It's been telling them about what data assets, about the programs and systems that we've got available, and then being responsive to how we think that could support their needs and what they're telling us. And that's been one of the key learning factors actually over the last year. So yeah, really good question. But yes, I think we're unique, but I think we're in it to learn as much as anything, and we want to be responsive to the needs of our key stakeholders.
Thanks, Rachel. Alistair, any supplementary questions? No. Okay, great. Fine. So, Rachel, I just have a couple of comments. So I just wanted to welcome the progress that you've made over the last 12 months. It's been really good to observe and to see the strategy come into life. I have a view, and I might get Matthew to comment on this, that there's probably more opportunity here than we are addressing at the moment, and therefore as a committee we should be encouraging the organisation to provide more resource into your area, because I think given we've got one of our strategic missions is to drive better value from data and outcomes, I think this is the place that we bring that to life. So I think there is an opportunity to do more in this space, but I'd perhaps defer to Matthew to see whether there's the demand for that in the wider service, and whether that's something we should be pushing a little bit harder from an organisational perspective.
Thank you, David. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, it's been interesting. It's been an exciting year to see the, if you like, the structure and the governance structure being put in place by Rachel and the team. That's been an essential component of what we can do in the future with the right mechanisms and oversights in place. Clearly, there's when it comes to research and innovation, there's a lot going on outside of Wales. And we're trying to deliver the assets and build the infrastructure for us to tap into that, and for Wales to be able to access some of these very exciting technologies that are developing all across the world, really. And we don't want to be last in the queue, I think, to access some of these exciting technologies. So I thoroughly support, if you like, the work that Rachel and the team have done to make sure we're building the correct mechanisms to give the right oversight to that.
Thank you, Matthew. Okay, so thank you for the report, Rachel. We note the report for assurance, and we're moving on to item 4.1, which is any other business. I've not been notified of anything in advance of the meeting, so I'll just ask if any of the participants have got anything they wish to raise. Okay, nobody's bringing anything to my attention, so we'll move on to items for the Chair's highlight report, which I will provide to the SHA board in March. I've noted a couple of things, but before I I mentioned those. I'll just open it up for anything that anybody on the call would wish me to raise on behalf of their part of the organisation or the wider organisation. Okay, so I can't see anything. The two that I've noted, which I will include in the report, are the good work that's been done on the risks assigned to this committee, in particular the two that Darren mentioned earlier. I think it's worth highlighting that our overall risk profile for those assigned to this committee has gone down, and that Darren with the finance team has done some good work to mitigate a couple of those risks. And the second thing I was proposing to highlight was the good work that's been done on the R&I strategy, the fact that we've reflected on a year of establishing that service, and that there is potential going forward to be doing more in this area, something which I personally will be picking up the next board development session when we discuss the long-term strategy. I think this is something that we should be, given the investment that's being made in the NDR programme, I think this is something we should maybe be supporting more with resources to allow Rachel to do even more good stuff for us. So those are the two things I had on mind. If nobody has anything else they wish me to add, okay, I'll draw this meeting to a close then. The next meeting of the DG&S meeting is on Thursday, the 2nd of May. There will be now a short 15-minute, actually it's, yeah, we'll stick with 15-minute break before we resume with the private session. So if I could say thank you all for those that have attended this session, and those of us that are participants in the private session, if you could rejoin the second meeting invite that you have in your schedule in 15 minutes time, please. Thanks everyone. Take care.